Good morning, learners all over the province of Free State. I am going to be your presenter this morning. I am George Moja. I'm the educator at Unitas Secondary School in Velcom. With you this morning, I'm going to do your November Geography Paper 1 paper, which you wrote on the 30th of October in 2014. And I would also like to congratulate you on your decision to write the paper again, those that did not do well, and for all those who want to improve their marks for this coming examinations. I hope you all have your November 2014 papers with you, and because of time, I'm not going to be able to do all the questions, but my main focus will be on those areas where the majority of you did not respond, give correct responses to the questions that you were asked. So please have your pens and paper ready so that you can jot down the important information as we go along. We will be starting with question 1. And also, as we are doing the memo with you, I'm just going to show you or to give you some tips as to what to look for when you attempt to answer your questions. The diagrams, as you always know, we have an annexure full of pictures, diagrams, photos as our sources of information. And I have mentioned this earlier before that it is important that your diagrams, they must speak to you. You must see information from them. You must make sense out of those diagrams or your sources. Even before you can start answering the questions, you are supposed to have an idea of what that picture is all about. So please feel free where you want clarity as we go along. You know the procedure to follow for you to have questions, your questions answered and your concerns attended to. So just make sure that as you prepare for your supplementary exams, that you have that question paper of November, that you can also use the September question paper that you wrote during your trial examinations, as well as your exemplar question paper that you were supplied with shortly before the examination commences. So make sure that you have all those 3 question papers for you to prepare thoroughly this time around for your supplementary examinations. Good luck for this morning. Let us go straight now to our important documents that you must be having now. As you see on your screen there, you have your examination guidelines, grade 12, 24, 2014. Just make sure that you don't have the old examination guidelines of 2009. Use the grade 12 examination guidelines for 2014 because it has all the information and all the expected topics that you have to master before you sit for your examinations. So we are going straight to question 1, which shows you figure 1.1, the cross-section of a tropical cyclone. Remember, in your syllabus, you are doing 2 cyclones, that is your mid-latitude cyclone as well as your tropical cyclone. So it is very important that you see in this question paper of 2014, you had that cross-section of the tropical cyclone, make sure that you also understand the cross-section of a mid-latitude cyclone, more especially in its mature stage of development, as well as the cross-section at the cold front of a mid-latitude cyclone. So as you study, as you prepare yourself for these examinations, please just make sure that you cover as much ground as possible in as far as your content is concerned. So figure 1.1 was on the cross-section of a tropical cyclone, and you were supposed to answer the following questions. The cloud type that is shown at A there. Let us check where our A is. So it means you must be able to know the clouds that are associated with a tropical cyclone. And in this case, we have the cumulonimbus clouds. And please, let us just make sure that we have the spelling of the cumulonimbus correct, because that is always a problem if you have to write the spelling of the cumulonimbus. So let us make sure that we have your cumulonimbus clouds as correct as that. So the clouds there will be our cumulonimbus clouds. And then the second question was based on the name given to the area B. The area B there, that is between those clouds that we have already mentioned. So you must always remember that your center of the storm, the center of the tropical cyclone, is called the eye. So immediately you see that gap between the clouds there, you must always remember that we have an eye there. So for the 1.1.2, the name given to area B in the tropical cyclone, there we will have our eye. And then we further have that, is the air pressure high or low in area B? We know for sure that the pressure there is low. We have a low pressure. And if you move over to question 1.1.4, in which general direction do tropical cyclones travel in the southern hemisphere? If you look at your diagram there, you see you have the direction of movement, which was your clue to say that the tropical cyclones move from east to west, or they move eastwards. So that is why I said to you that if you study your diagrams carefully and in depth, you will always find some clues as to questions that are being based on that particular diagram. And then the precipitation associated with cloud A, as we have mentioned cloud A to be our cumulonimbus clouds, there we have heavy rainfall. You can say thunderstorms. You can talk about hail. You can talk about torrential rainfall. So all those, remember that cumulonimbus clouds are associated with heavy rainfall. And then the air movement in area B, there we have area B also, which is our eye. And then you see the arrows just above B there, that the wind there is sinking. So we are having the sinking air movement, or we are having the downward movement, or we are having subsiding, or we are having that descending as it is indicated. So please just be careful as you deal with your diagrams. And then the question at 1.1.7 was that, is the air converging or diverging at area C? We were asked about whether the air there is converging or diverging at C, and then you can see it is moving out. That is why there we will have divergence of air. So the correct answer there was supposed to have been diverging. And then the last question on this diagram was on the name. What is the name given to the stage of development when a tropical cyclone moves inland? We still remember that when a tropical cyclone moves inland, it dies out because the temperature over the land is not the same as over the sea, and also over the land we have a lot of friction. So the tropical cyclone will die out, and then that will be our dissipating stage. You can talk about degenerating stage, you can talk about decaying stage, or you can even mention that the tropical cyclone is dying out. So please be careful about that cross-section of the tropical cyclone. Make sure that you know all information on the tropical cyclones. Now moving on to question 1.2 is based on geomorphology. There we have our drainage basin. So immediately you look at your drainage basin also. What comes into your mind? You see the drainage density there. You can be able to identify the drainage density, the drainage pattern, and all other concepts that are related to the drainage basin. And you must also be able to give the definition of what a drainage basin is. So the first question there, that was based on our drainage basin. It was all about name the drainage pattern shown in the diagram. So immediately you see that drainage basin. It looks like a tree, but that is not the correct definition, or that is not the correct pattern. Then you have to say it is a dendritic pattern. Also there we experience lots of mistakes as far as the spelling for dendritic is concerned. And please, as I have just mentioned, you are not going to give a tree-like as the pattern. Tree-like will be the shape of that dendritic pattern. So here the question was specifically on the type of pattern, and the type of pattern that we have there will be the dendritic. And then at which angle do the tributaries join the mainstream? Look at your tributaries. How do they join the mainstream? That will be your mainstream there. You look at how those tributaries join your mainstream. So you say that we have the small angles or acute angles, or you can mention any angles that are less than 90. You can write at 65 degrees, at 45 degrees, as long as the amount there is less than 90 degrees. So you have acute angles, or you can mention small angles, or you can talk about any angle that will be below 90 degrees. So please just make sure that you look carefully at your diagram and you can give the correct answers. 1, 2, 3. State whether this drainage pattern is associated with a surface that has a uniform or varied resistance to erosion. You remember dendritic pattern will be associated with uniform surface. That is, the resistance to erosion will be uniform. So the correct answer there at 1, 2, 3 will be uniform. And then 1, 2, 4 is the dominant process at A on the sketch, erosion or deposition. You see our A is at where the river originates, at our source. Now what you are asked there is the process that is found at A. Remember, there we will have more of erosion where our rivers originate, which is at our source because of the steep slopes. Then we'll have more water or high velocity of water, which will result in more erosion. And then 1, 2, 5, the stream order at point A. Also look at point A. There you have your first order, you have your second order. Remember, your tributaries will be your first orders, and where they join, we will have a second order. So just remember that one tributary will be your first order, another tributary is your first order, and where those two tributaries join, then we have stream order number 2. So please remember such as you go along. And then at 126, is area B an interflow or a watershed? It is found within a drainage basin. So if it is found within a drainage basin, that high-lying area that separates two streams, then we will talk about the interflow. So here we have the interflow, because this is the high-lying area separating this stream over here and that other stream. So that will be our interflow, because it is found within a drainage basin. And then the last question, is the discharge of the river greater at A or C? There we have our A, there we have our C. Our A is close to our source of the river, our C is almost at the mouth of the river. So we want to find out, where do we have a greater river discharge? Then it means more water will be found along C here. So you can also have a clue. You see, the tributaries, they have been drawn in very thin lines, but immediately you come to the mainstream, you can see that it is in bold and it is a little bit bigger, which gives you an idea that here we have more of water that has been contributed by all these tributaries. So we'll have more water at C as compared to at A. That must be very clear to you learners. So we are moving over to the next question, which is our 1.3. This is another question that poses some problems to most of you. So if you look carefully at the diagram there, it shows you that the settlement found there is found in a valley, and the heading there, study the sketch in figure 1.3, which is exactly what we are going to do. You study the sketch in figure 1.3 showing a temperature inversion in a valley. It has already been mentioned, and answer the questions that follow. Define the term temperature inversion indicated by B and C. So temperature inversion is where we have an increase in temperature with an increase in altitude. Where the temperature, we know under normal circumstances, we have temperature decreasing with an increase in altitude. But immediately you talk about inversion, we turn it around, and then we say the temperature inversion is where the temperature increases with an increase in altitude. That is a concept. It is just as is. And then 132, name the wind at A. Let us look closely at the wind at A. There we have the winds at A. So immediately you remember your work vividly. You will remember that the sinking air in the valley is called the katabatic winds. Those that blow down the mountain slope, more especially at night, we refer to them as the katabatic. So our answer there for 1.3.2 will be the katabatic wind, or downslope wind, or because they are influenced by gravity, you can also mention gravity winds. So we have alternative answers there, katabatic or downslope, or you can talk about gravity winds. Our question at 133, explain why the wind in question 132 commonly occurs at night in the valley. At night. At night, it means we no longer have the sun shining. After sunset, the valley slopes will cool down throughout the night. Immediately the sun sets, then it means the mountain slopes will lose their heat. The heat accumulated during the day here will be lost. And then we say the slopes will cool down. The air in contact with these slopes also, this air here in contact with these slopes will also cool down. And then the wind then will start to, cold air will start to sink down the slope under the influence of gravity. Remember, that is why we also refer to them as gravity winds, because they are pulled into the valley by gravity. So we say the cold air sinks under the influence of force of gravity. And then the cold, heavy, dense air will sink, because now this air has become very cold. Then it will start to move down the slope. We say it will start to sink into the valley. So that is exactly what was expected of you. Explain why the wind in question 1.3.2 commonly occurs at night. We have said at night the mountain slopes loses heat. They are cooled down. The air in contact with those mountain slopes also cools down, and it starts to move down into the valley. And we say the cold, heavy, dense air will sink. So that is why it happens at night. Just be very careful as you attempt to that question, should it come again. And then explain why radiation fog is likely to occur. Explain why radiation fog is likely to develop in the valley at night time. So we have already mentioned that the cool air subsides to the valley floor. The warm air that rises is cooled down to dew point temperature. Remember, during the day, warm air was accumulated here in the valley. So once the temperatures go down, that warm air will be cooled down to dew point temperature, and air at the bottom of the valley will condense. That air will condense, and that will give us what we refer to as fog, more especially during the night time. So we'll have fog because of that warm air that was accumulated here. Once that air is cooled down, then it condenses, and that will give us fog. And then the last question on this diagram was a long question. Let us be careful on our long questions. Forget about the 8 lines that you see there. You must not be that much worried about the 8 lines. What is important, you see your mark allocation there. You were asked to give 4 facts, which is 4 multiplied by 2. That is the most important aspect. In a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, evaluate the likely impact of the wind at A on farming and settlement on the valley floor. We have already mentioned that sinking air is very cold, and also it results in fog. So you can imagine if the temperatures in that valley drops that much, how will that have an influence on farming that you see? There are some vegetation there, on the people, lives of people that are living in that valley. So that must immediately you understand that that is cold air sinking, and also fog will be formed in the valley floor. So you must be able to explain how will that impact on farming and settlements. Cold conditions. The main word there is cold conditions. How will the cold conditions impact on farming? How will the cold conditions impact on settlements? Let us look at the impact on farming. Katabatic wind at night causes cold air to move downslope, causing a frost pocket to develop in the valley. That was already mentioned, that we will have a frost in the valley, And then we say frost-resistant crops are grown on the valley floor. We will be able to plant those crops that are resistant to frost. The cold conditions are important as they kill pests. The cold conditions and frost will be able to kill the pests on our vegetation. Cold conditions suits the growing conditions of these crops. There are crops, as we have mentioned, that are frost resistant, and they are therefore suitable to be grown in the cold conditions. And also, those are the positive impacts of frost in the valley. But also we can have a negative impact where we say the crops that are not frost resistant cannot be planted on the valley floor, or plants that are not frost resistant can die because of very cold conditions. So immediately you address the issue of impact. Don't just look at one side of the story, because impact can either be negative, impact can also be positive. So in your discussion, you can include both aspects of impact, which is your negative as well as your positive. So if we say there are crops that are good, that can be planted in the valley floor because they can resist frost, then that is positive. The frost can also be of use as it kills pests. That is positive. But once you say other crops are not frost resistant, therefore they will die as a result of very cold conditions, that is a negative impact, because now we are talking about killing of other crops which are not frost resistant. And we can also talk about the acid rain. As you see, we have pollution from the industries there. Now we know that pollution, once it mixes with rainfall, if we can have rainfall, then that smog, that pollution from the industries can form a weak acid rain that can damage crops. So have your facts there correct. And then now we're concentrating on farming only. Let us look on the impact of settlements. Remember, your question asked you about the impact on farming and also on settlement. And you have your 8 marks. So it means you must touch on both aspects, that is farming as well as settlements. So we have talked about crops, that was addressing farming. And now let us look at us as human beings. The valley floor is cold and damp, and therefore not suitable for settlement development. Because of those cold conditions, because of the dampness that will be caused by the frost, it will not be suitable for people. It will not be suitable for settlement, to have settlement in the valley because of those conditions. And the smoke that we have just talked about is trapped in the valley because of this inversion layer. The inversion layer will prevent this smoke from escaping into the higher layers of the atmosphere. And how will that impact on us? It means this smoke will just be trapped here in the valley, and this will lead to respiratory problems. People will suffer from different respiratory diseases like asthma. They can have chest problems. And because also of the pollution from the industries, visibility can be reduced, and the rate of accidents will increase. And also the acid rain that we mentioned under farming can also be harmful to buildings, because it is acid rain. It can corrode our paints, our buildings, we have painted them with beautiful colors, but because of that acid rain, that can be damaged by the acid rain. So whenever you come across the questions that needs you to touch on two aspects, remember to always do so. You must touch on both aspects, and you must also remember, because we are talking about the impact, you can also mention the positive impact. You can also mention the negative impact of any question that you might be asked on. So I hope that is very clear. Remember, our paragraph questions are written in this paragraph you are not supposed to write in point form, but use full sentences to answer our long questions. So I hope that is very clear on that question. Now we are moving on, and we go to question 1.4. I'll just try to move as fast as I can. On question 1.4, there we have the Bergwind conditions. So you have already studied your Bergwinds. You know exactly what are your Bergwinds. So immediately you look at your diagrams. There are certain things that you must already be able to identify. You see, you have your high pressure there in the interior. By now, you must be, by just mere looking at that diagram, you must be able to know what that high pressure is. And then it is also shown there. So I have also mentioned that every time you look at your diagrams, they must talk to you. So there must be one or two things that you can be that you will be able to identify even before you can attempt to answer those questions. Now, your concepts are very much important. If you look through your examination guidelines, you'll see you'll have a lot of concepts that you have to master by heart. So please just make sure that you have time to make definitions of different concepts that appear in your examination guideline. And you'll see at the start of each and every question, you'll be asked to define, or you'll be expected to define the word that will be used as the key in that sub-question that you are going to answer. So if you go to question 1.3, you are expected to study the sketch in figure 1.3 showing a temperature inversion in a valley and answer the questions. Showing 1.4, showing our Bergwind. Sorry for that. Figure 1.4 shows Bergwind conditions. And then you have to name the high pressure cell at A. Remember, I have already indicated to you that you remember your 3 high pressure cells. You have the one over the Indian Ocean, you have the other one over the Atlantic Ocean. So the one in the interior of the country is referred to as our Kalahari high pressure cell, or you can say it is the continental high pressure cell. So the second question there that we have, in which season do Bergwinds generally occur? We know that we experience Bergwinds in winter. That is not negotiable, that we must be knowing. We must know that by heart, that Bergwinds are usually experienced during winter months. And then 143, with reference to the diagram, state 2 conditions under which Bergwind conditions occur. We must have the Kalahari high pressure cell over the interior during winter. That is first condition. And we must also have a low pressure. You see there you have your L, which will at the coast, which will be your coastal low. So for a Bergwind to occur, 2 things must be there. You must have that Kalahari high pressure cell over the interior. You must also have the development of a low pressure, which we refer to as the coastal low. So those are the 2 obvious conditions that you must always mention. And then number 3, there will have the wind that moves down the slope. There you have the wind moving down the slope. Remember, our wind will always blow from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. So we have that wind blowing down the escarpment from that continental high pressure blowing towards the coast, which is towards our coastal low. So I think under berg winds, you have covered the ground immediately. You know those berg winds conditions, that you must have the presence of the high pressure cell and also the coastal low at the coast there. So those will be our three conditions that under which berg winds originate. And 1.4.4, we were asked to give one reason for the change in the temperature of berg winds as they blow from interior to B. Remember, we said here we have a low pressure, and usually where we have a low pressure, the temperature is high. There we have a high pressure, usually we will have low temperatures. Now you are asked what will happen to this wind as it blows down the slope. And you can see, you are given the clue there. There you have your 20 degrees as that wind leaves the plateau. But once it reaches the coast, then the temperature changes to 36. So that is your clue to say, oh, it means when this wind blows down the escarpment towards the east, temperature will increase. And that is what is given in the diagram. Air subsiding the escarpment heats up at the dry adiabatic lapse rate. Or you can also say there is a 1 degree increase in temperature per every 100 meters of descent. But what is clear from the diagram is that that wind will pick up in temperature from 20 to 36. That is very clear from the diagram. And then at 1.4.5, refer to the weather station at sea. There we have the weather station at sea. That is the information of the weather station at sea. And give one reason for clear skies. Why do we have clear skies? You can see there is nothing, no clouds there. The weather station is clear. Now, why do we have clear skies? You have to supply one reason. 145, clear skies at sea as a result of moisture evaporating when warm air warms up adiabatically. And then you have your 16 between 30 and 14. The difference between air temperature and dew point temperature there is 16, which makes it a very huge or large difference between the air temperature and dew point temperature, which shows us that the air is dry. That huge difference between the air temperature and the dew point temperature tells us that the air is dry, therefore we have little relative humidity, therefore those stable conditions are experienced due to the subsiding air. So there is no way that we can expect to have clouds, whereas the air that we have there is very dry. And then the last question on the berg winds, 146, why are berg winds associated with veld fires in winter? Remember, in winter over the subcontinent, it is generally dry. During winter, the vegetation is dry. The berg winds are warm, dry winds. That we must always remember, the berg winds. And then veld fires can easily be sparked because we have already mentioned that usually the vegetation in the interior there is very dry. So it is easy for strong winds to fan the fires. It is easy for this dry vegetation to catch fires. And because we have winds that are blowing from the escarpment towards the sea, those winds will also make that fire to spread quickly. So that is all about your berg winds. Remember, berg winds occur usually in winter. For them to develop, we must have our high pressure in the interior. We must also have our coastal low at the coast there. Those are simple conditions that lead to the development of the berg winds. And then let us move quickly to the long profile. This was also poorly answered. Most of you learners, you cannot define the long profile of the river. So that is the problem there. Explain the term longitudinal profile of the river. It was expected to say it shows the side view of the river from its source to its mouth. Immediately you mention that is when you look at this river from its source to its mouth. Then you have told us that we are looking at the long profile of the river from its source to its mouth. So those are the keywords that you must always have in your definition. And then 152, name temporary base level of erosion evident on the sketch. There we have our waterfall, there we have our rapid, and then there we have our hard rocks. Those are the three things that are evident from the sketch that shows that we have the temporary base level of erosion. And then 153, we have the ungraded river profile here. 153, you are supposed to draw a labeled freehand sketch of a graded long profile. So here you see the river is not smooth, it's uneven. This is ungraded, but you were asked to draw a graded profile. So that will be our graded profile. Then we have there our source, and this will be our mouth. So this is, if you just show graded profile, then it will have a very smooth and concave gradient. Smooth, there are no obstacles, but we have seen under the ungraded one, there are so many obstacles. It is not even, it is uneven. So that is ungraded river profile. So you were supposed to draw this one, which is very smooth from its source to its mouth. And then that was 3 marks that was given for your source, for the shape, as well as mentioning your mouth. So remember, as I have said, when you talk about your long profile, the most important things that you must mention is you look at the river from its source to its mouth. Hence, even here, we still give marks for that. And then the last question that was very, very, very poorly answered is this one here on 1.1.5. In approximately 8 lines, explain the processes that the profile in figure 1.5 must undergo to change from ungraded to graded. So you are just asked that you saw in your question paper was ungraded. Now we want to know what must happen for these temporary base levels of erosions to be removed so that the river remains ungraded or remains graded. So processes that the river profile must undergo to be graded. Downward erosion is number 1. Downward erosion must increase in the upper and middle course. We must have much of erosion taking place here. Remember, you have the upper, you have your middle course, you have your lower course there. So we must have more of downward erosion in our upper and middle course. Also, the upper course must assume a steeper slope. We must have a steeper slope in the upper course. In the upper course, discharge must increase and overcome friction. We are expecting to have more discharge in our upper course. Headward erosion must increase. Headward erosion must increase. And then the retreat of waterfalls to remove temporary base levels of erosion. Flattening of rapids remove temporary base levels of erosion. All those rapids must be flattened out. And then filling in of lakes remove temporary base levels of erosion. Those lakes that we have there, they must be filled up also. And then the stream carrying capacity must increase. There must be more of river load. And the gradient in the lower course must decrease. The gradient in the lower course must be decreased. And then in the lower course, the stream discharge must be reduced. It must be increased in the upper and reduced in the lower courses. And we must have more deposition taking place in the lower course. There must be more deposition in the lower course. And then the river now assumes a steep gradient in the upper course and a gentle gradient in the lower course. This is what will eventually happen. We'll have a steep slope in the upper course there, and as you move towards the lower course, then you'll have a gentle slope. So this question was really not well answered, but I have tried to mention there that you have your downward erosion. You must have a steeper slope in the upper course. The upper course, you must have more discharge in the upper course. Headward erosion must be there to remove all the temporary base levels of erosion. And then waterfalls must retreat. Rapids must be flattened out. Lakes must be filled in. The stream carrying capacity must increase to have more stream load, and the gradient in the lower course. Gradient in the lower course, there must be reduced, and deposition, we must have more of deposition here, and then that we will have a graded profile. So I've just mentioned that we are running out of time. I'm just going to move over to question 1.6, which was also very straightforward. There you have your natural levees. There you have, so if you look at question 1.65, where you were to discuss the negative impacts on the farmer should the river break through feature A. There you have your river, there you have your cultivated area. So you see that this water in the river here is prevented by these natural levees from flowing over. There you have your natural levee, there you have your natural levee also. Now you were asked, what will happen should the river break these levees? Obviously, we are going to experience flooding. These crops are going to be washed away, or will have damage to these crops. Loss of fertile soils, because where we have planted our crops, we have our fertile soil there. It can be washed away by that water flooding. And then the soil here will be oversaturated because of water spilling over here. Then the soil will be oversaturated, which will not be good for our crops. And then we'll have swamp conditions, because the soil is saturated. Then we are going to have water all over the place, which will also harm our crops. And then that will in turn tells us that the soil here won't be able to support the crops that were originally grown there. And then it means the farmer, because he depends on his or her farming to make income, once the crops have been washed away, it means the farmer living in this particular area will lose income. And then there will be no food, especially for subsistence farmers. There won't be any food for them, as their crops would have been washed away by the river spilling over the natural levees, or removing these natural levees. So that was a straight and forward question, where you just have to mention what would happen when these levees are washed away. So that is all for question 1, and I have tried to touch on those questions that were really very challenging for us. And then I'll just go over to question 2, but I will treat question 2.3, our synoptic weather map. This is very important, learners. You must master your synoptic weather map. It has all the information. Most of the information is found there. Study synoptic weather map. In figure 2.3, to answer the following questions, 2.3.1, give the term used to describe the linked mid-latitude cyclones on the synoptic weather map. So there you must have done your characteristics very well. And under the characteristics of the mid-latitude cyclones, we have mentioned that they are formed in families of 3 to 4 members. It is linked, you can see, you have the first one there, you have another one there. So we say mid-latitude cyclone form in a family. So the correct answer there will be family. Give the term used to describe the linked, this linkage is family. Then you just say we have a family of mid-latitude cyclone. So immediately you see them linked like that, just know we refer to that as the family of cyclones. And then 232 refer to mid-latitude cyclone A, which is the mid-latitude cyclone over here. And you must draw a labeled cross-section of front E. Our front E is our cold front. There you'll have your cold front. Then you just have to draw your cold front. You indicate there, this is a cold front. Remember, cold front is associated with those cumulonimbus clouds. And then we are expecting to have a very heavy rainfall. So the type of clouds, your cold front there, remember to mention your cold front. Remember to mention, because the air behind the cold front is cold air, there you'll have your cold sector, which is your cold air. Then you'll have your heavy rain, and then you'll have your cumulonimbus clouds. So those are the 4 most important things as you draw your cold front. Always remember to mention the type of clouds that are associated with your cold front. Show your cold front, your cumulonimbus clouds. Behind the cold front, we will always have cold air, and then the resultant precipitation from the cumulonimbus clouds there will be our heavy rain. So that was where your 4 marks came from. There you have your cumulonimbus, you have your cold front, you have your heavy rain, you have your cold sector. So out of that, you were expected to get 4 marks. Remember, where we started with the cross-section of the tropical cyclone. Now we are at the cross-section of a mid-latitude cyclone. And those are our 2 cyclones that we study in our grade 12. Now the question that comes after that, describe one weather change associated with the passing of front A. We have mentioned that the passing of this here is cold front. And already you have mentioned your cumulonimbus, you have mentioned your heavy rain, you have mentioned that you are having cold air behind the cold front. So you have answers already from the diagram. If you have drawn your diagram correctly, then you can take answers from there. The decrease in temperature, obviously when the cold front passes, it passes with cold air. What will happen to the temperature? The temperature will decrease. Cold air, decrease. The temperature will decrease. You have your cold air, meaning that your cold air will make the temperatures to drop. And then we'll have the change in wind direction. That is also important. There is your heavy rainfall. You have already shown that. So you are just repeating what you have drawn in your diagram. You say you have heavy rainfall with thunder and lightning. There is an increase in air pressure. Cold air is associated with low temperatures. Low temperatures, relationship between low temperature is that we will have a high pressure. The pressure will increase, therefore we'll have more clouds, increase in cloud cover. We have cumulonimbus clouds, very thick clouds. Then we say the cloud cover will increase, or you just mentioned that we will have cumulonimbus clouds. The wind speed, there will be more of wind speed, there will be less humidity, and we can expect to have snow. So that was only for 2 marks. So you have 2, 4, 6, 8 alternative answers that you can give. You can expect to have that. Maybe they can say you must give 3 weather changes associated with the passage of the cold front. So remember all those things, that the temperature drops. Once the temperature drops, the pressure will increase. There will be a cumulonimbus clouds forming. From the cumulonimbus clouds, we'll have heavy rainfall. So I think that is very straight and forward. And then 233 there. Your 233, also it was a long question. Refer to the weather station at Windhoek at B in a paragraph of approximately 8 lines. Describe and give reasons for any 2 weather conditions recorded at the weather station. This was also poorly answered. This is our weather conditions at Windhoek. There you have your air temperature, your dew point temperature, you have your wind direction, your wind speed, you have your cloud cover there. So you were expected to give 1 weather condition and explain the reason for it. Air temperature is 27 degrees Celsius because of the cold air descending from high pressure that warms up adiabatically to create a high temperature on the surface. Hence we have the 27 degrees, which shows us the temperature will be high as the result of cold air descending, and it is warmed up adiabatically, therefore it creates a high pressure on the surface. Our dew point temperature is minus 12. We just mentioned that. You have marks for just mentioning your dew point temperature, that it is minus 12 degrees Celsius. It is a dry area, and then it is winter, therefore there is less evaporation. Hence our dew point temperature is just that low. And then because we have mentioned that the air is subsiding air reduces humidity, so there is less humidity. You look at your wind direction, it is from northwest, or you can say west of northwest is still fine. The air is diverging in an anti-clockwise direction around a high pressure. That divergence in an anti-clockwise circulation. So you'll have your air diverging out, that will give us that northwest direction there. And then the wind speed, you can see, is 5 knots. Because the gentle pressure gradient, the isobars are far apart. You can see from our diagram here that our isobars are very far apart. And once the isobars are very far apart, we know that the pressure gradient is gentle. So the winds that are blowing there are very weak winds. And then the cloud cover, very little cloud cover. We don't have cloud cover as the area is dry. Remember, we have said that because our dew point temperature is so low, minus 12, so it means there is less humidity. Hence, there are no clouds, because once we have less humidity, there is no air that is going up that can condense and form clouds. And then precipitation, you can see between this, the air temperature and the dew point temperature, there is no any symbol used, so there is no precipitation. The subsiding air does not condense. Remember, we said this is formed due to the subsiding air, and from the subsiding air we cannot expect to have any condensation taking place. Therefore, there are no clouds that will form. And also, we can talk about there is no precipitation because there is a huge difference between air temperature and our dew point temperature. So you were expected to give the weather condition and give reason. It was only then that you would have got all those marks. And then the other important aspect that we must deal with here is the heat island. Remember what the heat island is: high temperatures over the city surrounded by lower temperatures of the rural area. What causes the heat island? Artificial heat in the city. There are many cars traveling in the city. There are many tall buildings in the city. There is large surface area that can be heated in the city. Material used to build buildings here in the city absorb more heat. And then also more heat from these tall buildings is absorbed inside the buildings, and then the air conditioning that is used in the cities will also generate more heat. So about the heat island, remember, heat island is when you talk about high temperatures over the city surrounded by the cooler. So we want to know, why do we have high temperatures over the city? So all the artificial heat that is generated over the city, those are the things that you have to mention to say why this high temperature over the city. And then I'll be moving now to question 2.55, which was also a nightmare for most of us. If you look at question 255 there, 2.5, read the research article on improving water productivity. So I'm just going to, you were given an extract there to read through, strategy for improving water productivity. So everything was mentioned under this here. And then I'm interested in this question of 2.55. In a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, explain how human interference along a river impacts on those that live further downstream. So once settlement is close to the river, we know we are going to experience a lot of air pollution. That is effect. So human interference along the river, also people who are living on the upstream will use most of the water, meaning those that live further downstream will have little water. So reduces the amount of clean water available for domestic use in rural area because of pollution that I have also mentioned. Pollution increases and water quality decreases. Once we have more pollution, then it means the quality of water will decrease. And then there are many waterborne diseases as a result of pollution. Also, it reduces the amount of water available for crop cultivation because people in the upper stream are going to use most of the water. It means those that live further down the stream will have less water. Less water means food insecurity because we won't have water to irrigate our crops, and the ecosystem in our rivers will also be disturbed. There is going to be an increase in the cost of water due to high demand because these people will have less water. There will be more controlled flooding, and that will impact negatively on the income of the people who are living down the stream. It is costly to buy clean water, especially for the people in the informal settlements because the water will have been polluted. So for them to have clean water, they'll have to buy water, which will be very costly for them. And also the natural flow of the river will be reduced, and then it will be more costly for these people who are living down the stream to irrigate their crops. And they will also have less water, and there will also be less water for industrial activities of people living down the stream. So we were asked about looking at 2 scenarios, that of people that are having settlement here and those that live down the stream. So if more people upstream use that water, means that these people that are living down the stream will have less water, and the water that they will receive will also have been contaminated by whatever that has been done in the upper course of that stream. And then because of time, I will jump over to question number 3. Question number 3, you must also remember under these settlements, we are doing rural and urban settlements. So you must have your facts very clear because we are only concentrating on settlement. Either we are talking about the rural settlement or we talk about the urban settlement. So we are not going to do all these objective questions. My concentration will now be on question 3.3. Question 3.3, there it shows you about an urbanization feature. So looking closely at that diagram, you can see here, we are looking at shacks. These are our shacks. Here also the clearer picture, they just wanted to show you exactly what is happening from there. So what must come into your mind? Immediately you don't have proper building material used. You must think about an informal settlement. Once the building material that is not used is not bricks or any other material, and you have these shacks, then what must come into your head must be the informal settlement. Now let us go to the questions here on this feature that is shown here. Identify the feature shown in figure 3.3. I have just mentioned the figure 3.3, the urbanization feature. There you have informal settlement. You can say it's a squatter settlement. You can say shanty town. You can say shacks that are shown there. And then 3.2, name 2 building materials used to construct the shelters in 3.3. So you can talk about anything that is used to build that. Bits of wood, planks, corrugated iron, zinc, cardboard, paper, plastic. We know them. We live in urban settlements where we have a lot of informal settlements. So you must just pick up any building material that is used for building the informal settlements. And then at 3.3.3, give 2 reasons why the building materials mentioned above were used. Because they are readily available, they are easy to assemble. Most informal dwellers cannot afford to purchase proper building material. Those people are poor that are living there, therefore they cannot buy bricks to build proper houses. There is a lack of transport to transport materials, or it is easy to take down and move to a different area. To dismantle these shacks is easy when you have to move to another area. So those are some of the reasons that are raised there. And then the long question that we had on this informal settlement was, you were expected to write a paragraph of approximately 8 lines to advise local authorities. What is it that can be done? Write a paragraph of approximately 8 lines to advise the local authorities on how to improve living conditions in these settlements. People are living in poor living conditions. Now, what is it that you can do as an individual to improve such conditions? Because it is not good for people to live in shacks after all. Now, what can be done? Basic services must be provided for informal settlements. Basic services: water, sewerage, electricity, waste disposal. These are things that we know they lack in most of our informal settlements. So once we provide those people who are living there with such services, it means their lives in a way will be improved. And then also to build proper houses, the RDP houses for them. We know that is the government initiative to build houses for people. So we can also say the government can build RDP houses for those people. And then those informal settlers must have legal ownership of the land where they are living. You must give them title deeds to say, this is your home, this is where you are going to stay. Increase access to amenities. Things like schools must be there, parks must be there in informal settlements, so that those people can also live normal life. And also provide transport for them, build roads. Transport must be available for them. And the most important thing is to make provision for employment opportunities. Once people work, it means they themselves can lift their standard of living. And let's have parks in there where children can play. Let's have open spaces where they can get oxygen, because we know that parks or green belts in urban areas provide us with oxygen, absorb more of the carbon dioxide. Also, it beautifies the areas where we live, and also promote gardening, that these people must create gardens at their homes so that they can also grow vegetables and be able to get some food to eat. So that is all about the informal settlements. Please, these questions always appear in our question papers. Just make sure, because informal settlements, we see them in each and every town, and we know the causes of the informal settlement throughout our country. So we'll move over to another question there. Which, as I have indicated, I'm just going to touch on those questions that posed problems. So 3.4 also, there it was all about urbanization. And once you understand what urbanization is, when we have more people coming in our cities, more and more people are moving from the rural areas, more and more people are moving from other countries into our country. And they all go to our urban areas, and that poses a very serious challenge for city planners. South African city planners face many challenges. So once you see urbanization, you must always remember what urbanization is. Definition of urbanization, that is where we have most of our population living and working in urban areas rather than in rural areas. So that simply means we have more people in urban areas. So the first question there, after reading that newspaper article, which sector of the population has been most affected by the lack of planning? The poorest member of our society are the ones who are faced by the lack of planning. 342, give two reasons why the sector of the population in question 3.4.1 has been most affected by the lack of planning in terms of transportation. Residential areas are on the outskirts of urban areas. That is exactly what we see in most of our towns, that our townships are far away from what we call the town, or I would put it correctly to say to our CBD, or where people can find work. They are living further from their places of work. It takes longer to get to work because of that vast distance between residential area and the places of work. Therefore, the transport cost will also be high, and this will result in traffic congestion, and there is also lack of proper public transport systems. 343, how will the increased traveling cost impact on household budgets? Because we have mentioned that these people are living far away from their places of work, which means they have to pay for transport every time they go to work. That will increase financial burden on household budgets, because most of the money that is earned by these people will be used for transport costs only. More of the budget will be used for traveling costs, less money for basic necessities. It means if you earn 400, you have to pay 250 for transport to travel to your place of work. You are only left with 150, which cannot meet other household needs for the family. And the last question there, the longer question, suggests 3 measures that urban planners can implement to reduce traffic congestion between people's homes and places of work. It means, because we have said our townships are far away from where people work, so it is better to build more housing near people's place of work, create better quality public transport, create more jobs in close to densely populated or townships, create more cycle lanes to try and fight the issue of traffic problem, plan irregular streets pattern to facilitate easier flow of traffic, create flexi times for businesses in town, ring roads to facilitate free flow of traffic. We must have more of the one-way streets to facilitate free flow of moving traffic, synchronized traffic lights that will control traffic, bus lanes, because we know buses are moving slower, they can also cause traffic. So if we have lanes only for buses, then that will also help them. And then we must have park and ride facilities, encourage lift clubs where maybe people who are working at one place can travel in one car rather than each one using his own or her own car. So when it comes to things like traffic, we must always be practical to think about solutions that can be given to ease the problems that is always seen in our urban areas. And then question 3.5, learners, please remember, more especially when we do economic geography, that we use tables, we use statistic information, we use graphs, and so you must be able to, you must have skill to interpret information from your graphs. You see figure 3.45, it shows the contribution of agricultural products to South Africa's economy. So you must be knowing what are your imports, things that we buy from other countries. Exports is things that we sell to other countries. So imports, they come into our country. Exports, they go out of our country. So you must be able to read, because if you look at the capture here at the bottom, the estimated value of imports for 2011-2012 amounted to so much million, an increase of 25.7 from so much. The value of exports increased by 12.3%. The value of exports increased by 12.3 from 45 million to 51 million. So all the information that is given in your sources, please make sure that you thoroughly read it. Right. Why I'm saying that, let us look at the questions under 3. Did South Africa import or export more agricultural products in 2011-2012? 2011-2012. There you have your imports in white color, your exports in black. So you can see that exports are more than imports. So it is straightforward. You just interpret that information that, okay, the darkened one is exports, this white one our imports. So you can just see in 2011-2012 we had more of the exports than the imports. So the correct answer there is exports. 352. Under which economic sector does agricultural production fall? It's obvious, it's under primary. And then by what percentage did South Africa's exports of agricultural products increases between 2010 and is given this here? The value of exports increased by 12.3%. It is just there. So if you have done your speed work, it will be easier for you just to go straight to there and you can just pick it up there. And then 354, state 2 benefits for the South African economy for a strong home market in terms of agricultural products: cheaper food, greater variety of food, development of rural areas. It provides raw materials for the manufacturing industry, development of processing industries, employment opportunity. That is very important. Food security, promotes small-scale farming, promotes more exports, improves our GDP, provides fresh products, and empowerment of women in rural areas. And then this other one of 356, evaluate how unreliable rainfall contributes to food insecurity. Food insecurity is when people do not have access to adequate food. Now, how does rainfall contribute to that? Unreliable rainfall increases soil erosion, risk of soil erosion. Unreliable rainfall creates a risk in crop yields. Obviously, if you have less rain, then the production of crops will also drop. Farmers become unreliable suppliers of food to the markets because now they can no longer provide food to the markets. Now they become also unreliable. And then also it increases the cost of food production because now farmers have to devise other means to irrigate their crops, which will increase costs. And also it results in food shortages, and it will increase food imports. Once we have shortage of food in the country, then it means the country is compelled to buy food from other countries. That will also make food prices to go up, and the poorest of the poor in our communities cannot afford high food prices. So please, you must try to apply your mind in all the situations that we are faced with in our country. And then the last question that I will go straight to will be our question 4. And also under question 4, I will only touch on those questions that were a real problem to most of us learners. The informal sector, 4.5. There we have 4.5 where we were talking about the informal sector. South Africa's informal sector is growing at the rate of 7.7, making it the fastest growing economic sector. This is closely linked to unemployment. They have already indicated that to us. Why the informal sector? We have just touched on the informal settlement. Now we are talking about informal businesses. So you must have a linkage between the two if you are answering question 3 as well as question 4. This informal sector must remind you of something. So under our 4.51 there, where we were asked about the informal sector, define the concept informal sector. Informal sector is whereby businesses or someone or people operate their businesses without registering them or without paying tax. As long as it's a business, people are doing business without those businesses having been registered or they do not pay tax, then we will refer to them as informal sector. So remember, all businesses in South Africa, according to law, they are expected to pay taxes. So these that are not paying taxes, we refer to them as being informal. And then the percentage, you see the South Africa's informal sector is growing at the rate of 7.7. So if you read all your questions very well, you get these answers again. State the percentage by which the informal sector is growing in South Africa. It is there. South Africa's informal sector is growing at the rate of 7.7. It's given. So I will always emphasize that you must read everything that is before you. And not just read it for the sake of reading it, but read to get information. Give one example of informal trading. In our townships where we are living, we are talking about car washes, saloons at the backyards, pirate taxis, the flea market, street vending, people selling vegetables at the corners, fruits. But All those things, we refer to them as informal. At our schools here, you will see there are people who are selling all sorts of goods to learners during break and so on. Those people, we refer to them as informal traders. And then give a possible reason why there has been such a rapid increase in the informal sector in South Africa recently. You see, it is given. This is closely linked to unemployment. Why are people in the informal sector, or give a possible reason why there has been such a rapid increase in the informal sector in South Africa recently? Unemployment. That is that. People lack skills, business skills, because of poor socio-economic status faced by most of the South Africans, high unemployment. Immigrants are not able to find legal employment and enter into the informal trade. People have been retrenched from their work, so for them to earn a living, they then jump into informal trading. Why are people in the informal sector reluctant to apply for trading permits? Because for them to be regarded as formal, they have to have trading permits. But why are they reluctant? Why are they not going for these trading permits? Because they simply don't want to pay tax. They don't want to be recognized as illegal immigrants. Remember, we said we have many immigrants in our country. So immediately they go to apply, then it means they will be recognized and they can be deported back to their countries. Others don't just want to comply with regulation, or others find it very costly to apply for the permits. So this brings me to the end of this question paper. As I have indicated, that I tried to touch on those questions that we found to have been poorly answered by most of our learners. And please, learners, as I have just shown you from this question that we have just done, some of your answers are there, but we know that you are very lazy to read through pieces of articles, through pieces of extracts that have been taken from what. Please, those things are there to give you a clue or to help you to get to your answers. So don't just rush through reading the questions, or don't just point or look for a word that appears in your question paper and look for it in the passage. But please take your time. Go through the passages, go through the extracts that are there. Look thoroughly at the sources that are given to you. And just relax, take your time. You have 3 hours to answer only 3 questions of 75 marks each, which is very little. You have more time, you have fewer questions, starting with our CAPS document. So please, just take your time, spend an hour on each and every question. Don't waste your time on those questions that you don't understand. Go to other questions, answer them. They will boost your confidence. And then once you have answered most of the questions that you master, it is then that with time allowing you, with time left on your question, duration of the question paper, go back to those questions that challenged you and try to read them over and over again with an understanding. And there are some things that you can still pick up and make up for those lost marks. So please be on time as you are going to write your examination. Make sure, as I have mentioned, that you must be having your examination guidelines with you, have your September question paper with you, have your November question paper which you wrote. Also go through your exemplar question paper. Take your time. Just make sure that each and every topic that appears in your examination guideline, even if you don't master each and everything that appears in there, but just make sure that you have an idea of what is happening in this particular topic. And make sure those that you know best, you make sure that you answer them all correct with the intention of having maximum marks from them. So please just make sure that you still have enough time to prepare for this geography question paper. I think it will be written somewhere 24th or 25th of February. So you still have time to even go back to the schools where you were attending, to ask for assistance from your teachers, to ask for notes that can also help you, clarity, and so on. I just believe those teachers are there and are prepared to help you improve those marks that you got in your November question paper. So all the best. I just hope I will be able to be with you in the next presentation as I walk you through the examination room, where we will look at the tips of what you have to do when you are confronted with a certain set of questions. So good luck in your studies. Please don't despair. It is not the end of the world that you didn't do well. You still have time. The department has offered you an opportunity to write again. And I hope with proper preparations, you will make it during these examinations. Good luck. Cheers till we meet. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have picked up some important information. Good luck. Thank you.